We are covering Maya and Toxim in this video. These moves are also called vertical figure eights as opposed to horizontal figure eight. We're starting in good posture, soft bend in our knees, our feet are under our hips, we're tilting the pelvis so that the lower back is flat, engaging the core to protect the lower back, lifting the chest, relaxing the shoulders back, and the hands are down at our sides with our pretty hand posture. We're starting out by just sliding our hips from side to side. It is not a Gwazi movement. It is just a hip slide. Still trying to keep that back flat as we do so. We are isolating the lower part of the body from the upper part. We are trying to keep the chest still and just move our hips from side to side. This is part of the motion that we use when we're doing our Maya and Toxim. Notice how I'm bending one knee and that makes the other hip push out. It is almost like a stretch when we do spin the cat, but this is also part of our movement that the hips are swaying from side to side, and that knee bending is also helping lift the hip up in addition to sliding it out. Notice it is the opposite knee to opposite hip. This is exaggerated. This is a little bigger than what we will actually do with Maya and Toxine, but this is getting that movement in our body. It is helping build muscle memory. And notice that I'm checking the posture, making sure we're engaged, lifted, shoulders back. And then we're resetting and going back into that. Doing that little push out to the side and then dropping down. It is the knee that's bending that's making that hip drop down. Check the posture again. Notice that we are not sticking our knee out. We're sticking the hip out. Opposite knee, opposite hip. It's not the same knee, same hip. So just trying that. It is okay if you exaggerate that movement. Check the pelvis, engage, look at the hips. And again, notice when you drop the knee down, the hip drops down. Trying that out. This is a hip drop, but we are going to add this into our outward movement to make our Maya and Toxim. This is part of that movement. Our shoulders are back, core engaged, chest lifted, making sure we're tucked. Just going back and forth, making sure one knee bends, the other knee bends. Now the other knee doesn't completely straighten. We have that side to side movement. Remember to keep breathing. Think about what the knee is doing. We're dropping the hip down, then we're pushing the hip out. The other knee is dropping, and that lifts that opposite hip up. We're going out, and the other knee is bending. We're taking that leg, going out, and bending the opposite knee. So if you are mirroring this video, and you are on the opposite side, you are going to bend your right knee, push the right hip out, and that's going to lift up when the left knee bends and straightens. Right knee bends, push the hip out and straighten. Left knee bends, we're going to push the hip out and straighten. Right knee bends, going out and straighten. Left knee bends, going out and straighten. Notice how my hip is dipping up or dipping down, depending on which hip you're looking at. And that is creating that figure eight movement. If you watch the line of my skirt at the top, you can see how the hips tilt up depending on which knee is bending, the opposite knee. I'm smoothing that out, straightening, and bending. Checking the back posture. If you put your hands on your back, you can feel if your back is flat. Still trying to stay tucked, flat back, engage the belly. And creating that figure eight with the hip, because this is the upward movement, it is Taxeem. I'm adding the easy hands movement for Taxeem, not a full snake arm, but just my hands swishing to the side, whichever side the hip is moving. If you need to, you can always leave the hands out. Hands make the movements more aerobic, but it is multitasking. Sometimes we forget our good posture when we start to add the hands. Now I'm moving back so you can see the full movement. My upper body is staying still. I'm slowly lifting my arms into that snake arm. When the hip lifts, the elbow lifts. This is a vertical style snake arm as opposed to a round snake arm. If my left hip lifts, my left arm lifts. If my right hip lifts, my right arm lifts. Now I'm making that movement a little bit smaller. I'm stepping forward so you can see the movement better. But that was a transition from just our hand waves to our snake arms. Now I'm moving to the side with just little small steps. I'm just scooting the feet. The hip goes out and the foot follows. The hip goes out, the other foot scoots in. Stepping forward. Taxeem is a move that we can do in place, or it is a move that we can travel. As we do this, remember to keep breathing, check our core muscles, make sure they're engaged to protect the lower back, trying to keep the pelvis tucked to keep the back flat. Notice how I'm walking back with that movement. I'm using that little dip in the hip to step down. Checking posture again, making sure the back is flat. Core muscles engaged, chest is lifted, shoulders back. Again, tuck the pelvis. Sinking down, soft bend into our knees. We are going to practice that movement again, our knee bending, and this knee is going to bend. When we straighten that knee, it's going to lift the hip up. So I'm showing that side view so you can see my knee is not completely locked, not completely straight, but it's straighter than the other knee. And that lift is going to help us lift the hip up. Then we're going to go out and drop down, the knee bends. This is our Maya, the opposite figure eight. Up, out, down. Again, up, out, down. So the knee is bending. Tucking, engaging, our left hip going up, out, bend the knee to drop down. Other hip up, out, down. Left hip up, out, down. Right hip up, out, down. Check the back, make sure it's flat. You can put your hands on your back to feel if it is staying flat. Remember to keep breathing, keep the chest lifted. Left hip up, out, down, knee is bending. Right hip up, out, down, the knee is bending. Up, out, bend the knee. Up, out, bend the knee. Left hip up or out, bend the knee. Right hip up, out, bend the knee. Checking the posture, remember to keep breathing. This is Maya. There are specific hand movements that go to Maya, and we will do that in a moment. Up, out, down. Up, out, down. Check the pelvis, make sure we're flat, engage, lift, shoulders back. We still want that soft bend in our knees. No matter what, our knees are bent. Even the leg that is straight, it is still bent. It's just not bent as much. We're smoothing that movement out to create the figure eight. And now I'm adding a wrist circle. This is a backward wrist circle. That means we start back, we go in, we go forward, and then we flip the hand over as we go out. We are pairing half of a wrist circle with each hip movement. So half of a wrist circle on the right, half of a wrist circle on the left. It takes a full figure eight to complete the wrist circle. Check our posture again. Make sure we stay tucked. Adding the wrist circles, it is multitasking. It gives us one more thing to think about. Smoothing that out, traveling with this move. I'm going back, lift the hip up as I step back. Lifting up as we step. Check the posture. Stepping forward. Again, we're lifting our heel and lifting the hip as we are stepping. My feet are fairly flat in both Maya and Toxine, but when I do step, I do lift up my heel a little bit for that step. When I step, I bring the foot out, and when I am starting my next part of the figure eight and bringing my foot, stepping out and stepping in. Starting this figure eight and completing the figure eight. Stepping out and the other figure eight. Check the posture, engage, lift. You can notice that my knee never completely straightens when I'm standing sideways. You can still see that soft bend in the knee. One knee will be more bent than the other. Going back to Taxeem, we're going to break up that movement. It's easier to transition from Maya and Toxine with something in between. Check the posture, make sure we're breathing. This is our Toxine. It is the upward figure eight. We start with our hip down and then go up. Toxine is paired with our hand waves or snake arms. And switching to Maya. Check the posture. Half of the figure eight, the other half. You can always leave out the wrist circles if it is too much to focus on. Check the posture, shoulders are back. In this move, if we are doing it correctly, our upper body is staying still and it is just the hips that are moving. We can also do chest figure eights, whether it is a chest Maya or chest Taqsim, but that movement requires our hips to stay still. And it is a harder movement. So we're just starting with the hip figure eight. Adding a little stretch, our skin the cat. Our knees are bending in the opposite direction that the hip sticks out. Clockwork arm, same stretch, just a different arm movement. It's nice to break up Maya and Toxine with little moves like that to help stretch our hips and stretch our back. Switching between them. Here's our Toxine. Get a little stretch in and really exaggerating and emphasizing the knees so you can see the mechanics of how the knees connect to the hips. Here's our Arabic. We're just doing an undulation in place before we switch to our Toxine again. As we do this, remember to keep breathing. Undulation. Check to make sure our knees are still bent. There are moments when our knees are straighter, but we do need that soft bend or else we cannot move our hips. This is our Maya. Going back to Arabic, our undulation. Get a little stretch on one side, the hip is sticking out, knees are bent in the opposite direction.